Okay, so welcome everybody. It's Colleen Wilson here, and I am going to be taking us through chapters 4 to 6 of Dr. Lineas' book, Healing Your Nervous System. This is an active book study that we're doing with a group of us and walking this journey very closely and slowly, actually, just because that's what's required when we're moving back into nervous system regulation. So these summaries that I'm doing from time to time are really not meant to replace the book. So whether you're watching live or listening or watching later on, please read Heal Your Nervous System by Dr. Lineas. It has got so much to offer. And I've been working with nervous system awareness since about 2013. So we're 2024 now. You can do the maths. And this is the most grounded tactical work that I've come across in that journey so far. It's super, super rich. And what I thought I would do in terms of going through chapters 4 to 6 now is actually weave it into a story, because is there any better way to understand things than through real life stories? So I'm going to share some with you. And I just think our personal stories add such dimension as well to each other. So it started when my nervous system awareness started when my son was born, and he's 15 this year. And he came into the world with a sensitive nervous system. And this was completely new to me, but he was the baby who was much better when his little doo-doo was muslin cloth was over his eyes, blocking out the stimuli. And when he had touch and deep touch and falling asleep on my chest and being rocked, and he wasn't a child that you took to a shopping center or a restaurant. And so within that complexity and that sensitivity, so began my journey. And as he got older and it started coming out in certain concentration issues or complex sort of social behaviors, and just going into overwhelm and dysregulation, emotional dysregulation very easily. And so I did a deep dive into parenting with the lens of the nervous system. And since then, I've been teaching parents to parent nervous systems, not to parent personalities. And it's been a very, very rich journey. But what I didn't realize at the time was that my son was like the canary in the coal mine. So he was like screaming nervous system sensitivity. But what he showed me in fine-tuning my thinking and my understanding was that both myself and my daughter also had highly sensitive nervous systems, which we, up until that point, had masked. And we were just sort of resilient, blazing through life, extroverted, doing our thing. But while we were doing that, our bodies were taking enormous strain because of nervous system dysregulation that went undetected. So what manifested in my daughter by the time she's now 20, by the time she was 18, was this dysautonomia, which had her in the emergency room 9 times in a year with acute gastric symptoms that she had to be medicated and on IV. It was an incredibly traumatic experience. So the stress caused an experience that in itself was incredibly stressful. And that was from years and years of masking a sensitive nervous system. And then for myself, my journey has been this lack of awareness of operating in the yellow zone for decades, like many of us do, but with a highly sensitive nervous system operating in yellow. And I'll talk to you about that yellow zone in a moment because it's in chapter 5. But what that did, so operating, in other words, at a chronic long-term level of hyperarousal in my nervous system, is it created high levels of cortisol, high levels of inflammation, high levels of oxidative stress, which then resulted in dysfunctional mitochondrial health, which then means a lack of health at a cellular level. And so there's never been really, I've got a few things that have a label, if you like, an autoimmune label, but I've had extreme compromised health without much discernible understanding in it, because it's this dysautonomic nervous system dysregulation caused systemic health issue that has never really arrived at full-blown disease as such, where a doctor can say, oh, you've got that, but it's completely compromised my quality of life. And I think the reason why it hasn't developed into full-blown disease is because I do so much anyway, and I work with naturopaths and somatic healers and nervous system coaches and nutritionists and functional doctors, etc. But the actual work that I'm doing now at home, regulating my nervous system, is the powerful work. So these long-term issues have created these issues in my home, where I've got a son with a sensitive nervous system that he's had since birth. That's been clear. My daughter unmasking hers and me getting familiar with mine. And so brings us to this point in this work where I'm looking at all of us and these, what Dr. Lineas calls the alertness elevator. And where do we sit on the alertness elevator? Now, the alertness elevator is basically the level of our stress response. So we've got multiple levels of arousal that we'll move in and out of throughout the day. And where we are stuck at too high a level of arousal for too long is where the problem comes in. So the elevator starts at the blue level, which is a place of deep rest, deep sleep, deep meditation. And this is the cellular restoration space that I was missing, and so many of us were missing for so many years. Deep healing happens here. So that's a blue level. The next level up is green level, and I like to call this flow state. It's like when you're playing tennis and you hit the middle of the racket, that sweet spot. It's when we do life in flow state. And obviously none of us are going to stay here forever. No, nobody is. But this is the aspirational state, because this is when our nervous system is regulated and where we are just really moving flexibly through life. The next level up is the yellow state. And this is a state of kind of, now we're on the hamster wheel. We're on the treadmill. We're doing life. There's like this drivenness. There is an arousal in our nervous systems. There's alertness in our nervous systems. And we get things done here, but it comes at a price. And being able to go to yellow and come back to green and blue is what's key. That's nervous system flexibility, which is a huge part of what this work is all about. And then there's the red state. So the red state is that hypervigilant state. It is hyper aroused, fear responsive, acute stress state. And we don't want to be here for long. We need to be here when things go down. And I'm going to tell you a story just now about running over my dog and going into the red state. She's fine, but it was 2 days ago, and it tipped me far into red state. And it's a story about how I came back from that, which I'll share with you a little bit later on in our chat. But red state and yellow state are states to learn to visit and come back down from. And then we have the purple state, which is a state of hypovigilance. It's a freeze response. It's in places of acute stress where we actually go into shutdown. And it's a low state, dorsal state of our nervous system. And it's also one we don't want to stay in, because our bodies can't restore and we don't have healthy engagement, flexibility, responsiveness, etc. in this state. So 2023 was a year of horror for me, and it was one where I spent a lot of time constantly in yellow, a lot of time in red, and a lot of time in purple. It was just a year where everything came at the same time. It was also a state where somebody in my home was struggling acutely with depression and really not wanting to be on this earth, and it put me into a state of hypervigilance. And my daughter was extremely sick. It was the 9 times in the ER, and it was just a wild, wild year of nervous system dysregulation. And I could see it, but I was so in the fire, and this is what's driven me to find ways of how do we be in the fire better, because what happened to me is I ended up with shingles. And if ever there's a nervous system screaming help, it's when you get a nervous system inflammatory disease like shingles, because it's literal. It's not figurative. Like the nervous system's playing up and it's ended up in some random part of your body. It's literal, nerves on fire. So I just looked at this. I had been, steeping in nervous system work for so long, but how did I end up in this state? Yes, it was a diabolical year and super stressful, but how do we increase our resilience? How do we increase our capacity? How do we do the fire better? And so it's been this organic growing understanding of mine, which I now feel is like ready to share with the world. And that's hence me telling the story, because I think there's nothing more authentic and powerful than sharing these real life stories. So I knew I had work to do. Enter, heal your nervous system. All three of us needed nervous system regulation. So if we look at the stressors, how they happen in our life, I love the way she divides them up into these like traumatic stressors. So it could be a one-off event that's just extremely embarrassing or extremely traumatic, but it's something that stresses our nervous system. And we go into yellow and into red. And then whether it's minutes, hours, days, weeks, or months, we come down from that. Okay, we might revisit it and it might bounce backwards and forward, but essentially we re-regulate and we integrate that into our system and it's done. Then we get the PTSD, which I think a lot of us use that term because we keep on having recurring stresses, but PTSD is really when there's never a break in the hypervigilance from stressful or traumatic event or events. And there's constant nervous system agitation and there's intrusive memories. So can we heal from it? 100%. But while there are still those intrusive memories, then it is still active. And then we've got what she calls embedded alarms. And this really resonated with me because it's not PTSD in the sense that there's this intrusive thinking at random times and hypervigilance all the time, but you'll be plodding along and then something happens and it'll just kick you over into red and just kick you over into red again. And these embedded alarms are like snapshots that our brain takes, and then something happens and it reminds us of that and it says to our brain, danger zone, and we have this hyper arousal response. And so I had an example of that last time my daughter was out from college because she's in a different province from what I am, from her home. And she came home and we had gone through the year of those extreme vomiting, gagging experiences that ended up in the ER. And she was in her room, I was in mine, and she gagged on something, some water. But it sounded like the gagging from her original episodes that she would have. And as I heard her gag, I went in, this embedded alarm kicked in. And she knows, and she shouted through the wall, I'm fine, I'm okay, I just choked on water. I was like, okay. So that's an embedded alarm. And again, for us to know that is to then work with it to bring it into regulation. So these are the stressful events that take us into these different levels of arousal, and nervous system resilience is about bringing us back to green and blue faster and for longer. So Dr. Lineas talks about this in terms of the 5-stage plan. And in chapter 5, she just gives a very brief overview, because from chapter 7 onwards, we're going to get into each one of these stages and deep dive into them. So the first stage is awareness, which is really around pattern recognition. So that's when we go, oh, okay, so that's a trigger for me. Or, oh, okay, when this happens, I shut down, or I start screaming, or I start crying, or I withdraw, or I binge eat, or whatever the case is. We start recognizing our patterns. And a lot of that is somatic awareness, starting to recognize what's going on in our bodies. Like this morning, I woke up with a headache, but it's not a headache. It's a nerve pain headache. And I knew that I was stressed about being prepared for the Zoom on time and getting my son to his maths lesson, and was he going to be okay this morning? And I just had to do the work to not take the headache tablet, but to recognize the awareness, nerve pain, my nervous system is talking to me. So that's her first stage. Her second stage is regulation, which is when we start learning the flexibility. And again, a lot of this is somatic, body-based practices, regulation, and the mind coming back into blue and green states. The next stage is restoration. And here we start delving into some of old wounds, and we start really doing some deep work. Again, body, mind, and heart at this stage involved in terms of the 4 pillars that she talks about in this restoration phase. And here's where true lasting healing starts to happen. The 4th phase is connection, relationships. A lot of that's around boundaries and cultivating of healthy relationships and cultivating of team around us. My goodness, the nervous system regulation from knowing that we are held in this realm as well, in this human realm, by a team of people that see, support, soothe us. So this is, again, heart space, connection space. And then the 5th stage of nervous system re-regulation is expansion. And here we bring in the spiritual element, and we start exploring concepts like gratitude and awe, which are just so beautiful. And like I said in my previous YouTube or video in chapters 1 to 3, my love for her work has been the parallels with my work, where my model is know yourself, grow yourself, show yourself. So again, it's awareness, regulation, restoration, connection, expansion, know, grow, show. And so it just ties so beautifully together. So while we're looking at these stages, and before I share the story with you about my most recent jumping into the red zone, is her 4 pledges. I want to go through them quickly, and I'm just going to refer to my notes so that I don't forget them, because these pledges are important, and I really encourage you to read them fully in the book because they laid out beautifully. This is not a race, okay? This is mindful, intentional, committed, beautiful work that the years for some of us, decades for some of us of compounded dysregulation require the time. So the first pledge is I will take small actions many times. Okay. So in the world of instant gratification, let's not look for quick results here. Although I was just saying to one of the ladies earlier in our chat, I'm finding my nervous system, and she talks about this, in fact, highly sensitive nervous systems are very responsive. So I can put in a small input and feel the benefit of it straight away. So small actions many times. Pledge number 2, I'll take it slowly. Pledge number 3, I'll do one thing at a time. And this is especially when this work is new to you. For me, I've been doing this for so long that so much of the work I have already done, and I do already, it's in my repertoire. But if you're starting out, and even for me, bring one new step in at a time. If you're starting out, one thing at a time, get that integrated, get it as part of your rhythm of your life, and then move on to the next thing. And then I'll face obstacles as challenges. And I absolutely love this. So what just happened 2 nights ago, within a short time of it happening, I was like, okay, horrible, traumatic, and opportunity. There's an opportunity here to test my ability to re-regulate my nervous system in a state of high stress and a traumatic event. So these pledges and this work that I'm going to share with you now is foundational to the 5 stages of nervous system regulation. So what Dr. Lineas talks about is to bring in a supportive scaffolding into our lives to lay the foundation for these 5 stages. What I find is that while these are foundational, these 4 areas of scaffolding, of groundwork, are also things to bring in when we are in the fire. So they are physical sensation, they are sleep, they are nutrition, and they are home. And so the story that I'm going to share with you is that 2 nights ago, I was walking our dogs, and my spaniel, I was parking the golf cart again, but I had just dropped off the spaniel, and I was moving slowly, but she had just spotted the neighbor's dog. And so what I did really stupidly is I accelerated to try and block her from seeing the dog and going off to sort of do her spaniel thing, get all hyperactive and really bother my neighbor. But as I did that, she ran in front of the golf cart. So we both at full pace connected, and I connected her back leg under the wheel, and I had to reverse off her. Now, for those of you that follow me on social media or know me personally, you'll know that that dog is my great love. She's my therapy dog, my support dog. I actually bought her for my son, but she's my soul dog. We're very connected, and hurting her was extraordinarily traumatic. Excuse me, just having some water. So I was very shaken and very worried about her, and my nervous system, as you can imagine, was frazzled. So I saw this as an opportunity. First of all, I felt myself, after the red zone was hit, I felt myself dropping into purple and going into shutdown, thinking I can't eat dinner. I was just lying, holding her, crying. I didn't want to talk to anybody. I didn't want to eat dinner. And then I was like, okay, purple zone, hold on a second, and nothing good happens in purple zone. So what do I need to do to restore my nervous system? And these scaffolding steps that we're encouraged to take before we start the 5 stages are what I brought in to re-regulate my nervous system. So I'm going to explain them very briefly, and then what I did. So body sensation, this is how we feed. I see this as a meal to the nervous system. Imagine the most beautiful, nutritious rainbow plate of food you're going to feed your body, and see these physical, sensationary inputs as a meal for the nervous system, to really feed it, to nourish it, to balance it, to regulate it. So the first thing is vestibular movement, which is kind of your swinging and rocking movement. And so with that, I popped on the swing that we've got in our garden, and I let myself swing for a few minutes, and just knowing that it was doing that vestibular work. And then I've got a favorite exercise that I do every morning, which is a swing, standing up and swinging the body, when you literally slap your arms on from one side to the next while you're swinging your arms out and moving your upper body while keeping your hips still. Fantastic vestibular movement, and bonus is that it's very good for spine mobility. So I did those 2 vestibular inputs. Then the active proprioceptive, which is resistance movement. It's sort of pushing, climbing, and I've got resistance bands that I work with, and I just use my resistance bands on my arms and on my legs, which I also love. I find it very, very soothing. There's lots more that you can do, but you need to go and read in the book to find out what appeals to you. I'm just sharing with you what I did. Passive proprioceptive is a beautiful sensory input. So again, it's resistance, but it's passive resistance. So I went and climbed under the weighted blanket. And but before I did that, my dog, once I checked that she was okay, her leg was very cut. And by the way, she's fine. There's no damage. The x-rays were all clear. But at that time, I had just bandaged up her leg, and I pulled her onto me. The weight of her on me was the passive proprioceptive, and I know it was good for her as well, because her little shivering body calmed, and we just had the weight of her on me, and she had me connected with her. So that passive proprioceptive I also did in combination with the olfactory, which is the sensory. Later on in the evening, I got my Serenity oil from doTERRA, put some coconut oil, and I massaged it into my feet, which was also passive proprioceptive as well as olfactory, and it helps me sleep well. The tactile input, which is all about sensations on the skin, and I had an extremely hot shower, which I love, but I intentionally had a long hot shower. And then when I got into bed, I pulled my most fluffy, furry, beautiful blanket right up to me so that I could feel it on my neck and on my face, and I curled it around my arms, and I had that I went to sleep that night with that blanket like wrapped around parts of my skin that were exposed, and I found that very soothing as well. So sensory touch on the skin is your tactile input. The gustatory input, I had my usual cup of tea, but this time I also added nutmeg and turmeric to it for nervous system calming and as an anti-inflammatory oil, and just savored it. I just absolutely savored that cup of tea. I could already, from all of these things, feel myself re-regulating. Auditory, that night I went to sleep with a meditation in my ears, which was lovely. And then visual, it was night, so I didn't really have a visual input, but visual is anything beautiful. And a lot of these are sensory. So even this diffuser that I'm showing you on the screen now, if you're watching this or if you're listening to it, my diffuser is the oil. So it's olfactory. It makes a gurgling sound. So it's the auditory input, and it changes color. So it's visual input. So there's just these multiple ways that we can bring these in to regulate our nervous system. And then there was sleep, which I didn't have a great night's sleep that night. I must be honest. I was worried because I was only x-raying her the next day, but I had a better sleep than I expected to because I had done all of these inputs. And when I did wake up during the night, I went back to smelling the oil next to my bed, pulling my blanket up close and feeling it on me, pulling the blanket heavy on me, and just aware of putting these inputs into my nervous system. And then even just thinking about swinging, thinking about the things that are calming and constructive for our nervous system. Nutrition is another one, just foundational. Not that I did it for that particular thing, but very much a key area, which I'm not going to go into because it's an entire science onto its own. But nutrition is absolutely key for nervous system healing. And then home, just keeping our home simple and decluttered, which I do anyway. And I find that to be phenomenally soothing. So those are the baseline places to get to: nutrition, sleep, simplifying our home, and the physical sensory inputs. And that's the groundwork to nervous system healing. So just something I wanted to read here so that I don't forget it. Doing positive things reduces stress and expands capacity. I wanted to just make sure that I said that, because it's not just about reducing the stress in the moment, it's also about expanding our capacity for the future. So there's that wonderful glasses analogy where there's two glasses, they're both the same size, and then there's marbles in the glass, and the nervous system that's highly sensitive has more marbles in the glass. So as we do life and the water pours into the glasses, it spills out of the glass with more marbles faster. So we're going to nervous system overwhelm faster when there's highly sensitive nervous systems, but that's not a life sentence, because we can increase the capacity of the glass. And just understanding this work, capacity of the glass, just pulling in sensory inputs starts to increase the capacity of the glass. Just seeing stressors as challenges and opportunities, not just as obstacles and struggles, starts to increase the capacity of the glass. Just being here with me is increasing the capacity of your glass. So this is the work. So responsivity continues to be updated throughout our life, and the more we do, the more responsive our nervous system gets. So we are not destined to repeat patterns and to be stuck in a certain nervous system responsivity. We have got flexibility, we've got choice. So thank you for being with me. Thank you for sharing this live with me and listening to it and watching it later on. I hope you've gained and enjoyed. Carry on reading the book. Stick with me in the book study. I'm going to stop recording now and say cheers to the rest of you and just carry on with some questions for those of you that are in my book study. So until next time.